She hadn't eaten in 2 days because no one in the Cross Mansion would feed her. One caregiver quietly placed the untouched bowl back onto the silver tray and whispered, "No one wanted her." The words lingered in the air longer than the steam that had already faded from the soup. At the center of the tray rested a polished silver spoon engraved with 2 delicate letters, VC. Across the room, Vivian Cross, one of the youngest billionaire CEOs in America, sat motionless in a black wheelchair beneath a crystal chandelier that glittered like a crown she could no longer carry. Her scarlet robe stood out against the white room. Her hands rested helplessly in her lap, fingers trembling but refusing to obey. Then Marcus Reed walked in through the service entrance, wearing worn work boots, a faded navy shirt, and the quiet exhaustion of a father who had already worked 1 shift before sunrise. Caleb Voss, Vivian's fiancé and the company's CFO, barely looked at Marcus before saying, "He's a courier, not a caregiver." No one defended him. Somewhere across town, Marcus's 8-year-old son, Jonah, was waiting for the father who had promised to pick him up before sunset. One accusation inside this mansion could cost Marcus his temporary job, destroy the clean record protecting his custody agreement, and leave Jonah with no one else to trust. Yet the woman in front of him had been left hungry because everyone with expensive credentials had decided she was simply impossible. Before the story continues, tell us where you're watching from. And honestly, would you risk everything to help someone everyone else had already given up on? If stories about courage under pressure matter to you, don't forget to subscribe. Marcus stepped closer, but stopped an arm's length away. He did not lift the spoon immediately. He lowered himself until his eyes met Vivian's instead of looking down on her. "If you don't want my help," he said quietly, "blink once." The mansion became unnaturally still. Even the nurse arranging fresh flowers by the window stopped moving. Vivian never blinked. Instead, one silent tear escaped the corner of her eye. Marcus waited another heartbeat before carefully lifting the engraved spoon. He moved slowly, giving her every chance to refuse. Caleb sighed impatiently. "She refuses everyone. You're wasting our time." Marcus answered without turning around. "Maybe everyone forgot she's still the one making the choice." No anger, no performance, just calm. The sentence unsettled the room more than shouting ever could. As the spoon paused inches from her lips, Marcus noticed something almost invisible. Vivian's eyes were not fixed on the soup. They kept drifting toward the small paper medicine cup beside the tray. Her trembling fingers tightened for the briefest moment against the red fabric covering her knees. Almost nothing. The kind of detail most people would miss. Marcus didn't. Years spent helping his late wife relearn ordinary movements after her stroke had taught him that healing often whispered before it spoke. He gently lowered the spoon again instead of forcing another inch. Caleb's polished smile disappeared. "Feed her, Mr. Reed," he said coldly, "or leave this house." Marcus looked once at the engraved spoon, then at the untouched medicine cup, and finally back into Vivian's frightened eyes. For the first time since entering the mansion, he asked a question no one in that room seemed prepared to answer. Who decided she had to take the medicine before anyone asked whether she wanted breakfast first? By the time Marcus Reed left the Cross Mansion that afternoon, the question he had asked was still hanging in the white bedroom. No one had answered it. Caleb Voss only told the nurse to clear the tray, and the nurse moved too fast. Marcus noticed that. He noticed the untouched soup going cold, the little paper medicine cup disappearing beneath a linen napkin, and the silver spoon engraved with V. C, being carried away as if it were evidence instead of a utensil. Then he walked through a hallway lined with oil paintings, past a vase taller than his son, past a security guard who looked at his work boots before looking at his face. Outside, the air smelled like fresh-cut grass and old money. Marcus crossed the long driveway between 3 black SUVs and climbed into a dented gray sedan with a cracked passenger mirror. Some men would have stared back at the mansion and felt anger rise in their throat. Marcus only checked the time. Jonah was waiting. 27 minutes later, he pulled up beside a small elementary school on the west side, where the paint on the playground fence was peeling and the crossing guard knew every child by name. Jonah Reed stood near the gate with his backpack hanging from one shoulder and a folded drawing pressed against his chest. His breathing carried that faint whistle Marcus had trained himself to hear before anyone else did. Not dangerous yet, but close enough. Marcus opened the glove compartment, shook the inhaler, counted what was left by the thin rattle inside, and handed it over without making fear show on his face. Jonah took one puff, then studied his father the way children do when they know an adult is hiding the hardest part. Did the lady eat? Marcus paused with one hand still on the steering wheel. He had only told Jonah there was a woman in a big house who needed help, and that too many people around her had forgotten how to wait. Not much, he said. Jonah unfolded the drawing. It showed two hands, one dark, one pale, the darker hand underneath like a small bridge. In the corner, Jonah had drawn a silver spoon bigger than it should have been. Mom used to say hands remember, Jonah said. Marcus looked toward the windshield for half a second, long enough to keep the old grief from becoming something Jonah had to carry. Denise had said those same words after her stroke, back when Marcus was learning how to lift a cup to her lips without stealing her pride. He had never been a registered nurse. He had no letters after his name, but he had learned the difference between helping and taking over. That difference had stayed with him after Denise was gone. Their apartment smelled faintly of laundry soap and warmed rice. Marcus reheated leftovers, checked Jonah's homework, and slid 3 unpaid envelopes beneath a chipped blue magnet on the refrigerator. Rent, asthma medication, custody review fee, small papers, heavy consequences. Jonah ate at the table while Marcus stood at the sink washing one spoon, one fork, and one plastic lunch container. His phone buzzed. The first message was from his courier supervisor. Missed delivery window, final warning. The second came from an unknown number tied to Cross Estate. Return tonight. Private care trial. Double pay. No questions. Marcus stared at the last 2 words. No questions. Across the kitchen, Jonah pushed the drawing toward him. Dad, he said softly, when somebody can't raise their hand, you raise yours for them, right? Marcus closed his eyes for one breath, because a child had just made the hard things simple. Then his phone buzzed again with the side entrance code and one instruction that made the warm kitchen feel suddenly cold. Bring no witnesses. The side entrance of the Cross Mansion was not really an entrance. It was a narrow steel door hidden behind sculpted hedges, far from the front steps where guests arrived beneath warm lights and cameras. Marcus Reed stood there at 8:47 p.m., holding his phone with the access code glowing across the cracked screen. His worn boots rested on a stone path, so polished it seemed built to reject dirt. In his jacket pocket, Jonah's folded drawing pressed against his ribs like a second heartbeat. When the lock clicked open, a security guard looked Marcus up and down without moving his head. Deliveries go around back. Marcus kept his voice level. I was asked to return from his cross. The guard's eyes moved from Marcus's faded shirt to the old gray sedan parked near the service drive, small and tired between 2 luxury cars. For care. The word carried more doubt than the question needed. Marcus did not argue. He showed the message. The guard read it twice, as if the phone itself might be lying, then opened the door just wide enough for one man to pass. Inside, the service hallway smelled of lemon cleaner and expensive silence. Staff members moved quickly with their heads down, their shoes whispering across the floor. On a corkboard near the pantry, Marcus saw a schedule with names crossed out in black marker. Refused food. Through tray. Unsafe behavior. Impossible. The last empty line waited for someone to write his name. At the end of the hall, Caleb Voss stood with a tablet in one hand and a legal folder in the other. His charcoal suit fit perfectly. His smile did not reach his eyes. Mr. Reed, he said, not offering a hand. Before you see Vivian again, we need clarity. You're not medical staff. You're not family. You are here on a temporary private trial because the estate is out of options. Marcus nodded once. I understand. No, Caleb said softly. You understand kindness. That is different from liability. Behind him, the white bedroom door stood half open. Marcus could see Vivian's wheelchair near the window, her scarlet robe bright against all that pale luxury. Her head was angled toward the hallway. She could hear every word. Caleb lowered his voice just enough to sound reasonable. She does not need another person encouraging fantasies of independence. She needs control, routine, and compliance. Marcus looked past him, not to challenge him, but because Vivian's hand had moved. Barely. Her fingers pressed against the armrest, then released. On the bedside tray, the engraved silver spoon had been placed beside the bowl again, polished clean, angled perfectly toward her. Too perfectly. A young nurse near the doorway caught Marcus, noticing, and looked away. Caleb saw the glance. Is there a problem? Every eye in the hallway shifted toward Marcus, waiting to see whether he would get loud, grateful, defensive, or afraid. He chose none of them. No problem, he said. I just don't feed people like they're furniture. The nurse's hand froze on the doorframe. Vivian's eyes lifted. For half a second, the woman everyone called difficult looked less angry than startled. Caleb's smile thinned. Be careful, Mr. Reed. In this house, good intentions can become abuse if the wrong person describes them that way. Marcus slid Jonah's drawing deeper into his pocket and stepped toward the bedroom. As he passed the tray, the spoon gave a tiny metallic click against the porcelain bowl, though no one had touched it. Vivian's eyes dropped first. Then Marcus saw what she saw, a faint fresh scratch running through the engraved C, catching the light like someone had tried to erase part of her name. Marcus did not touch the scratch spoon right away. That was the first thing Vivian noticed. Everyone else in that room grabbed, adjusted, lifted, wiped, corrected. Marcus waited. He stood beside the tray in his faded jacket while Caleb Voss watched from the doorway with the calm patience of a man who believed every room already belonged to him. The soup will get cold, Caleb said. Marcus nodded, but his eyes stayed on Vivian's hand. Not her face, not the wheelchair. Her hand. 2 fingers pressed into the armrest, released, then pressed again, uneven but deliberate. Most people saw defiance in that movement. Marcus saw timing. He lowered himself into the chair beside her and placed the silver spoon flat across his own palm. Handle toward her, bowl toward him. I'm not asking you to eat yet, he said quietly. Just feel the weight. The nurse near the window looked uncomfortable. Caleb gave a short breath that was almost a laugh. This is not therapy, Mr. Reed. Marcus still did not look at him. No, he said. It's permission. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Suspicion came first. It had to. A woman like Vivian Cross had not survived boardrooms, lawsuits, and family money by trusting soft voices. Her pale fingers trembled above the spoon, hovering as if the distance between her lap and his hand were miles. Marcus did not close that distance for her. He waited. At last, the side of her index finger touched the handle. The spoon tilted. A small silver sound clicked through the room. Caleb stepped forward. That's enough. Vivian flinched before Marcus moved. It was fast, almost invisible, but it changed the air. Marcus saw the flinch. So did the young nurse. She looked down at the floor, as if the marble had suddenly become interesting. Marcus placed the spoon back on the tray, exactly where Vivian could see it. The scratch through the engraved C caught the light again. Beside the bowl sat the medicine cup, cloudy at the bottom. Marcus looked from the cup to the clock on the wall, then to the printed care schedule clipped to the tray. Medicine before meal. Meal after compliance. Rest if agitated. The words were neat. Too neat. Who wrote this schedule? Marcus asked. Caleb's tone stayed pleasant. Her physician approved it. That's not what I asked. The room went still. Not because Marcus had raised his voice. He had not. Because a man wearing worn work boots had just refused to let a rich man change the question. Vivian's breathing grew shallow. Her eyes moved to the spoon again. Then, with visible effort, she dragged one knuckle against the tray. One tap. Marcus turned toward her. Again, if you can. Caleb's face hardened. She's confused. Another tap came, weaker but clear. The nurse whispered, almost against her will, she does that after the medication. Caleb shot her a look that shut her mouth. There it was. Not proof. Not enough to save anyone, but enough to make the wrong people nervous. Marcus made no accusation. He only reached for a clean paper napkin, wiped a faint pale ring from the bottom edge of the medicine cup, and folded the napkin once. Then he set it beside Jonah's drawing in his jacket, close to his chest. Caleb saw the movement. Vivian saw Caleb see it. For the first time, fear in her eyes was joined by something smaller and more dangerous. Hope. Caleb smiled again, but this time the smile arrived late. "Mr. Reed," he said, "before you continue, the estate attorney would like a word with you downstairs." Marcus looked at the spoon, the schedule, the woman in the wheelchair, and the folded napkin hidden against his heart. Then the nurse's phone buzzed on the windowsill. She glanced at the screen and went pale. "They're moving the board review up," she whispered, "to tonight." For one brief minute, the room almost felt human. Vivian's second tap still seemed to hang in the silence, and even the young nurse could no longer pretend she had not heard it. Marcus Reed stood beside the tray with his hands open where everyone could see them, giving Vivian space, giving her time. The silver spoon lay between them, scratched through the engraved C, no longer just a utensil, but a question no one wanted to answer. Caleb Voss had gone still in the doorway. That was the first sign the moment had mattered. Not his anger, his stillness. Vivian's eyes stayed on Marcus. They were not trusting. Not yet. But she was watching him differently now, as if she had found the edge of a door inside a wall. Marcus lifted the bowl only after she looked at it. "One small bite," he said. "Only if you choose it." The nurse swallowed hard. Caleb's jaw tightened. Marcus dipped the spoon into the soup, wiped the bottom edge against the bowl so it would not drip onto Vivian's scarlet robe, and waited. Vivian's mouth trembled before it opened. Barely. Enough. The spoon touched her lips, and for a second the whole mansion seemed to hold its breath. She swallowed. One bite. After 2 days of untouched trays and whispered blame, Vivian Cross swallowed one bite because someone had finally asked instead of forced. The young nurse covered her mouth. Marcus lowered the spoon and gave Vivian the dignity of not being celebrated like a child. "That's yours," he said quietly. "No one gets to take that from you." Then Caleb stepped into the room and took it anyway. His voice remained smooth, almost sad. "Stop." Marcus turned only slightly. "She chose that. You have no authority to determine what she chose." Caleb lifted his tablet. On the screen was a frozen hallway image from earlier. Marcus leaning over Vivian with the spoon in his hand, the angle ugly, the context gone. "This is exactly what we were afraid of." The nurse looked from the screen to Marcus. "That's not what happened." Caleb did not even look at her. "You are an employee of this estate, not a neurologist." Marcus felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. Once. Twice. He did not check it until Caleb placed the document on the tray beside the spoon. Temporary suspension of private trial. Possible coercion incident. Mandatory report if subject continues contact. The words were clean. The threat was not. Marcus looked down at his phone. Jonah's school number. Then a text from the aftercare director. "Jonah is waiting. Please confirm pickup." A thin line of cold moved through Marcus's chest. Caleb saw his face change and lowered his voice so only Marcus could hear. "Go get your son. Be wise. A man in your position cannot afford a misunderstanding." There it was. The door out. The safe choice. Leave the spoon. Leave the room. Leave Vivian to the people who had learned how to make neglect sound professional. Marcus looked at Vivian. Her eyes had dropped to the silver spoon, and her fingers were shaking against the armrest, trying to reach it, failing by inches. He could still walk away. He should have walked away. Instead, he placed the spoon gently back within her line of sight and said, "I won't touch her again without a witness." Caleb's smile returned. "Good. Then you won't touch her at all." He slid another paper from the folder, this one with Marcus's full name already typed at the top. "Sign this before you leave. It says you admit you acted outside your role." Marcus stared at the paper. Behind him, the silver spoon clicked once against the tray. Not from his hand, from hers. Caleb Voss did not push the confession across the tray. He placed it there gently, the way men like him place traps and call them options. The paper sat beside the silver spoon, bright under the bedside lamp. Marcus Reed's full name printed at the top in clean black letters. Statement of voluntary acknowledgement. Unauthorized contact. Failure to follow care protocol. Each phrase was careful enough to sound legal and cruel enough to be useful. Marcus Reed only the first line, then looked at Vivian. Her fingers had gone still again. The one click she had forced from the spoon had cost her more than anyone in the room understood. Caleb noticed Marcus looking at her and softened his voice. This does not have to become public. He tapped the folder once. You sign, you leave through the service entrance, you pick up your son, and no one calls your employer. No one contacts the custody reviewer. No one has to explain why an unlicensed courier was alone in a disabled woman's bedroom with a spoon in his hand. The nurse's face drained of color. Marcus heard the threat land like glass breaking, though nothing moved. Jonah. Custody. Work. Name. Every pressure point laid neatly on the table. Marcus took out his phone. Another message from Aftercare waited on the cracked screen. Final pickup warning. He pictured Jonah sitting on the little blue bench near the office, backpack between his shoes, pretending not to be scared because his father had taught him to be brave too early. Caleb stepped closer. Be smart, mister. Read. Kindness is admirable. Paperwork is stronger. Marcus almost smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was exactly what men with power believed. He set the phone face down beside the tray. Where's the witness you said I needed? Caleb's expression barely shifted. Excuse me? I said I wouldn't touch her without a witness. Marcus looked toward the young nurse. She was here. Caleb turned his head slowly. Nurse Patel has already been reminded of her obligations to this estate. The nurse stared at the floor. Her badge trembled against her chest. Vivian's eyes moved from Marcus to the nurse, then to the medicine cup, then back to the spoon. She was trying to build a sentence out of things her body could still reach. Caleb saw it and moved first. He picked up the silver spoon with 2 fingers, as if removing a dangerous object. This will be secured. Marcus did not grab for it. That was what they wanted. A sudden movement. A raised voice. A black father in a rich white bedroom, looking exactly as threatening as their report needed him to look. Instead, he stepped back and kept both hands visible. If you take it, he said, write down who touched it. The room froze. Nurse Patel looked up. Caleb's jaw tightened for the first time. You are not in a position to give instructions. No, Marcus said. I'm in a position to remember them. It was a small sentence, but it changed the shape of the trap. Caleb placed the spoon into a clear evidence pouch from the attorney's folder, then slid the confession closer. Sign. Marcus picked up the pen. Vivian's eyes widened, furious and afraid. Jonah's drawing pressed against his chest inside his jacket. Marcus thought of his son's words in the kitchen. When somebody can't raise their hand, you raise yours for them. He lowered the pen to the paper, but not under the confession line. At the bottom, beneath the printed statement, he wrote one sentence in block letters. I request a witness and a review of the medication timeline. Then he signed his name below that. Caleb stared at it, the polite mask slipping just enough to show the anger underneath. That was a mistake. Marcus capped the pen and stepped away from the tray. Maybe, he said, but it's mine. His phone buzzed again. This time it was not the school. It was a photo from an unknown number. Jonah sitting beside a woman in a county office lobby, eyes red, backpack on his knees. Under were 6 words. Child Services has been notified. Caleb did not smile. He did not need to. The trap had already closed. For a moment, Marcus Reed forgot the chandelier, the silver tray, Kayla Voss, and every cold eye in the room. All he saw was Jonah sitting in a county office lobby with his backpack on his knees, trying not to cry in front of strangers. The photo blurred in Marcus's hand before he forced his breathing steady. Caleb had chosen carefully. Not a punch. Not a threat shouted across the room. A child in a lobby. A father's weakest place. You should go, Caleb said, almost gently, before this becomes harder to explain. Marcus looked at Vivian. Her face had gone pale beneath the careful makeup someone else had applied. Her eyes moved to his phone, then to him, then to the clear pouch where the silver spoon now lay sealed like a weapon. She understood enough. Maybe not every word, but enough to know the trap had reached his son. Nurse Patel took one step forward, then stopped when Caleb turned his head. Fear pinned her in place. Marcus reached inside his jacket and unfolded Jonah's drawing. The 2 hands stared back at him, one holding up the other. He laid it on the edge of Vivian's tray, not as proof, not as drama, but because his son had drawn the truth better than any lawyer in that room could write it. "I'm going to get my boy," Marcus said. His voice was low, clean, no begging in it. Caleb's shoulders relaxed, mistaking dignity for surrender. Marcus turned toward the door. Behind him, the spoon clicked inside the plastic pouch as Caleb lifted the folder. "And the statement?" Caleb asked. Marcus stopped, but did not turn around. "You have my statement, not the one we requested." Marcus looked back just enough for Caleb to see his face. "Then maybe you requested the wrong thing." He walked out before anger could make him useful to them. The hallway felt longer than before. Staff stepped aside, not out of respect, but to avoid being included in whatever Caleb was building. At the side entrance, Marcus's phone buzzed. "Nurse Patel." 3 words appeared on the screen. She tapped twice. Marcus froze with one hand on the steel door. A second message came before he could answer. Not for food, for board. He understood then. Vivian had heard the board review was tonight. She was trying to get there, not because she trusted Marcus completely, but because somewhere inside that trapped body, Vivian Cross knew the people around her were about to use her silence as consent. Marcus should have kept walking. Jonah came first. Jonah always came first. But Jonah's own words rose in him with painful clarity. When somebody can't raise their hand, you raise yours for them. Marcus called the county office number from the photo and said, "This is Marcus Reed. I'm on my way. Do not move my son without my voice on record." Then he turned away from the exit and went back toward the pantry corkboard. He did not have a spoon. He did not have power. He barely had time, but he had memory. He photographed the crossed-out caregiver schedule, the meal notes, and the care protocol clipped beside the pantry phone. Medicine before meal. Meal after compliance. Rest if agitated. Then he saw Caleb's mistake. A printed board agenda on the counter, listing Vivian's competency review at 9:30 p.m., with Caleb Voss presenting temporary voting authority. Marcus took one photo. That was all. The security guard caught him before he reached the hall. "You need to leave." Marcus put the phone in his pocket and raised both hands where they could see them. "I am." Caleb appeared behind the guard, his smile gone now. "No, Mr. Reed," he said. "You're trespassing." Marcus was escorted out through the side door into the cold night, the same door he had entered through, only now his name had been turned into a warning. His son was waiting across town. Vivian was being rolled toward a boardroom where silence would be used against her. And inside Marcus's pocket, beside Jonah's drawing, his phone held a photograph Caleb did not know existed. The cross-mobility boardroom was designed to make even powerful people feel replaceable. 40 feet of polished walnut, glass walls that reflected every expression like evidence, and a silence so controlled it felt manufactured. Vivian Cross sat at the center of it all in her wheelchair, her cream blazer too structured for a body that had been treated like an object for weeks. Her fingers rested on the communication board, but they were not resting peacefully. They were tense, waiting. Beside her, sealed in a clear evidence pouch, the silver spoon engraved with VC caught the ceiling light like a restrained memory. Caleb Voss stood just behind her shoulder, voice smooth, perfectly calibrated for authority. "This is not personal," he said to the board. "This is stabilization. Vivian Cross is currently unable to reliably communicate or maintain consistent decision-making under her condition. Temporary voting authority ensures continuity. No one interrupted. No one challenged. That was how power worked here. Silence counted as agreement." Outside the glass, in a hallway, Jonas sat on a bench too large for a small frame, hands folded tightly around his backpack straps. A county worker stood beside him, pretending not to notice how often the boy looked toward the boardroom doors. Marcus Reed should not have been here. Everyone in the building had already agreed on that. Yet when the elevator opened again, he stepped out anyway. Worn boots, faded jacket, the kind of presence people instinctively try to label before understanding it. The security guard moved immediately, hand near his radio. "Sir, you were removed." Marcus lifted both hands calmly. "I'm not here to disrupt anything." His voice carried no aggression, only time pressure. "I'm here to make sure she is heard." Inside the boardroom, Caleb paused mid-sentence. A few heads turned. The chairwoman frowned. Who allowed him in? No one answered. Marcus stepped forward just enough for everyone to see him clearly, but not enough to challenge security. His eyes went first to Vivian. Not the board. Not Caleb. Her. You don't need to speak out loud, he said gently. But you do need to be the one deciding. Caleb let out a controlled breath. This is inappropriate. She is under medical supervision. Marcus didn't look at him. She is under interpretation. That word landed heavier than anything else in the room. A beat of silence followed. Vivian's fingers moved slightly on the board. Not a full gesture yet. A hesitation. A resistance forming inside control. Caleb noticed it immediately and shifted tone. Vivian, if you can understand what is happening, indicate compliance with the procedure. Compliance. The word tightened the air. Marcus stepped closer, not toward Caleb, but toward the board. Don't answer them, he said quietly. Not like that. Vivian's hand trembled. The spoon in the sealed pouch reflected her movement like a delayed echo. For a moment, she didn't move at all. Then her fingers pressed down. One letter, then stopped. Her breathing changed, subtle but visible, like she was fighting her own body to not obey someone else's framing of her. Caleb's jaw tightened. This is exactly why. No, Marcus cut in softly. Not loud, not aggressive. Final. This is exactly why she was never asked properly. The room went still again. Even the air seemed to pause. Vivian's finger moved again. Slower this time. More deliberate. And then oh. She stopped there. Not as an incomplete word, but as resistance. A choice to refuse their structure entirely. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. The chairwoman leaned forward slightly. Caleb stepped half a pace closer, but Marcus raised a hand, not to block him, but to signal something different. Patience. Vivian's hand trembled harder now. Her eyes fixed on Caleb for the first time in the entire session. Not fear, not confusion, recognition. Then she moved again, slowly, struggling. Each letter felt like it cost her something physical. Corso A-L-E-B. The room changed temperature. Nurse Patel, standing near the wall, brought a hand to her mouth and looked away before she broke completely. Caleb's expression finally slipped, not fully, but enough for everyone to see the pressure underneath control. This is not valid communication, he said quickly. Marcus didn't respond. He simply stood still, like he was holding space for something fragile enough to collapse under an eruption. Vivian's fingers left the board for a moment. She exhaled shakily, then returned, this time slower, heavier. The final word came not as accusation, but as exhaustion becoming clarity. F-I-R-E-D. No one spoke. The spoon in the pouch clicked faintly against the tray as her hand trembled again. That small sound somehow felt louder than everything else in the room. Outside the glass, Jonah stood up on the bench. His small hand pressed against the window, searching for his father without understanding all of it, but understanding enough. Inside the boardroom, the chairwoman closed the file in front of her. Not sharply, not dramatically, just enough to end the direction of the room. Mr. Voss, she said quietly, step away from her. Caleb looked around, searching for authority that no longer responded to him. None came. Not from the board. Not from the room. Not from the system he had been controlling minutes before. Security moved, not toward Marcus, but toward Caleb. And for the first time, Vivian Cross didn't look like someone being managed. She looked like someone who had just taken her name back. The spoon remained sealed, but no longer silent. It had become proof that silence had ended. The boardroom was already in motion to end him when Marcus Reed walked back in. Not metaphorically, not emotionally, physically. The doors opened, and every head in the cross-mobility executive chamber turned at once, like a system registering an unauthorized return. Worn boots on polished walnut floors. A man who was not supposed to be inside that room anymore. Security moved instantly, but Marcus raised both hands before anyone could speak. Calm, not surrender. Control. I'm not here to disrupt, he said. His voice carried no urgency, only precision. I'm here for her. Vivian Cross did not move at first. Her fingers hovered above the communication board as if they had been waiting for something that logic had not yet approved. The silver spoon sealed in its pouch sat beside her like a quiet accusation, reflecting the overhead lights in fractured lines. Caleb Voss turned slowly from the legal table, his expression already rewritten into composure. "You were removed," he said. Not loud, not emotional. Certain. Marcus didn't look at him. Removed doesn't mean wrong. A few board members shifted in their seats. Not yet resistance, but uncertainty. Marcus stepped forward just enough for Vivian to see him clearly. Not the board, not the glass walls. Him. "You don't have to prove anything," he said to her quietly. "Just don't let them finish speaking for you." A pause, heavy enough to bend attention. Caleb exhaled through his nose. Controlled irritation. "This is a medical and legal proceeding, it's a decision," Marcus cut in softly. That interruption changed the temperature in the room. Not because it was loud, but because it was final. Vivian's fingers tightened on the edge of the board. A tremor moved through her hand. The spoon in the pouch caught that movement and reflected it back like a delayed heartbeat. She had been spoken about for the entire room. Interpreted, defined, reduced. Now there was silence long enough for her to exist without translation. Caleb stepped half a pace closer to the table. "Vivian, confirm understanding of current proceedings." The phrase landed like a lock trying to close. Marcus didn't move toward her. He did not interfere. He only gave her space. "Don't answer that version of it," he said quietly. "Answer yours." That was all. No instruction, no pressure, just permission to exist outside their framing. Vivian's breathing shifted, barely visible. Her eyes moved from Caleb to the board, then to Marcus. Something inside her resisted the structure in front of her. Her fingers pressed down. One letter appeared, then stopped. The room tightened. Caleb's jaw flexed. "This is not." Marcus didn't even look at him. "Let her finish." A silence, so dense it felt physical, filled the space between them. Then Vivian moved again. Slower now, not hesitant, enduring. And then a full stop without punctuation. Not agreement, not compliance. Refusal. A few board members glanced at each other. The chairwoman didn't speak yet. She was watching something shift shape in real time. Caleb exhaled, sharper now. "She is not medically stable enough for interpretive decisions." Marcus stepped forward 1 inch. Not threatening. Present. "Stop describing her," he said. "She's already here." That landed differently. Not as argument. As correction. Vivian's hand lifted again. This time it didn't shake as much. It moved towards something heavier than refusal. Recognition. She began spelling again. Not for the room. For herself. Corso A-L-E-B. The name formed slowly under the lights, like it cost her something to complete it. A nurse near the wall covered her mouth, stepping back as if the word itself had weight. Caleb finally lost a fraction of composure. "This is being influenced," he said quickly. "This is..." Marcus turned slightly toward him for the first time. Not anger. Not challenge. Clarity. "She's been influenced the entire time," he said. The room stopped breathing correctly after that. Vivian's hand left the board for a moment. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. Not collapse. Release. Then she pressed one final time. Not spelling anymore. Declaring. F-I-R-E-D. No flerisc. No ceremony. Just completion. The spoon inside the pouch clicked faintly as her hand trembled again. The sound small but absolute in the silence. Outside the glass, Jonas stood from the bench, pressing his small palm against the window as if trying to reach a version of his father that no longer needed saving. Caleb looked around the room, searching for structure that no longer responded. None came. Not from the board. Not from the staff. Not from the system he had controlled minutes earlier. The chairwoman finally closed the folder in front of her. "Mr. Voss," she said quietly, "step away." And this time, the room obeyed her instead of him.